tossed like cargo, sold like stone. The sea still whispers, remember their moans. 130 souls chained in the dark, thrown to the waves, erased like a mark. No justice spoken, no mercy named, just silver and gold, just profit and shame. Oh, the ocean remembers, the waves still cry, bodies turn to water, but spirits don't die. Atlantic waves still calling our name. Song to today, the system's the same. Insurance paid for a life, not a man. Blood wrote the ledger, signed by their hand. But the sea became witness, the tide became quiet, carrying the screams through centuries of fire. We are not garbage, we are not trade, we are the roots that slavery made. We are the storm, the thunder, the rain. We are the ocean they can't contain. Oh, the ocean, remember. The waves still roll the water, but spit don't die. Atlantic graves still calling our name. From the song to today.
Okay, I hope that you were able to see the video. Um, that is a video of commemorating the Zong Massacre. This chronicles the passage of just one slave ship from Europe to Africa, heading to the Americas. It was in 1781. Because of insurance reasons, this is the history. 132 people were chained together and dumped into the Atlantic Ocean. When they got to their destination, there was a court hearing about the lost cargo. They did not see these bodies as people. They saw them as property. And so the main concern was not the souls lost. The main concern was the money lost, because they would not be able to of course, get any pay for these 130 people. So the Zong Massacre remembers that one ship. And I say it that way because, as you know, uh, the slave trade went on for several hundred years, and countless number of ships would make that voyage through what became known as the Middle Passage. Um, Alex Haley, in his documentary called Roots, back in the late 70s and 80s, chronicled similar passage. One of the most memorable scenes in that series, and do look it up, Roots. One of the most powerful scenes uh, was, of course, they showed the African bodies down in the bow, the bottom of the ship, uh, just packed in as many as they could get in very, unclean uh, situations. But the Africans began to speak with one another. And of course, they all had different languages. They were from different tribes. And but they figured out a way to communicate with one another, and they decided that they would attempt a revolt. And this scene of Alex Haley's Roots, they battle, they fight, they are able to disarm some of their guards, some of the slavers. They were able to disarm some of them, and some of the captured slaves were able to capture Africans because they're not quite enslaved yet in America. But they were able to get away, only to find out that at the top of where they were being kept was the ocean. So how do you swim back? How do you get back home from that? So the Zong Massacre is very moving to me, and because this is faith, family, and political affairs, um, commemoration of Black history, and we're honoring Black history in this edition, which we are calling Break Every Chain. I just wanted to share that video, and I hope you were able to see it. I had such difficulty in trying to share it, but to me, it's very moving. The words, just listen to the words in the song if you're able to listen to it. Um, but we are the ocean. We are the people that the ocean could not contain. It's very moving. Um, so I wanted to share that with you. And do look up the Middle Passage. You can learn a lot about not just the Zong Massacre, but so many of the other ships, and how so many of the Africans who were being transported did not make that voyage alive. And that is one more travesty, of course, of the slave trade. The number of souls and lives that were lost just on the voyage between Europe and Africa and the Americas. Um, that blood cries out still from the bottom of those oceans and the bowels of those ships, where disease took some lives, um, and um, and those people never even made it to the destination. So we, in Black History Month, honoring it, we remember those souls. Today, I was delayed in coming to the broadcast because of a new development with the case of Don Lemon, now an independent journalist, once an anchor at CNN. Um, he is being charged, has been charged with some crime in connection with his coverage of a nonviolent church protest in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where an organization decided, they learned that the pastor of the church was also field director for ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And there have been so many clashes in Minnesota, 2 lives lost. Renee Good and Alex Pretty, 2 lives lost in those clashes of the citizens of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and also, I believe, St. Paul, Minnesota, with ICE agents. So lives have been lost, and certainly many people have been injured as well. Um, but the people there learned that this pastor had that other role in his life. And they thought it was hypocritical for a minister of the gospel to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ on Sunday and then to, you know, be an ICE agent during the rest of the week. And certainly in those clashes with ICE, I mean, they just have been so violent. They've used tear gas, they've used that pepper spray on people. Um, People have been pushed to the ground. Some people call it assault, you know. Um, and so when the protesters went into that church, of course, the federal government stepped in to say how wrong that action was, even though it was nonviolent. And they've pressed charges against several journalists. Um, Georgia Fort of Minnesota is another journalist who has been charged um, in connection with that protest. So Don Lemon was in court today. He was arraigned. He pled not guilty, as we all expected him to do. And his lawyers have made a plea to the government to let them have all of the details of the grand jury so that they could understand why this grand jury decided that it was okay for the federal government to proceed with this case when other legal voices had said that it was an unfair case, not grounded in any law, and should not proceed. So his lawyer has asked for the grand jury transcripts so they can understand how this grand jury concluded that the case should proceed. So in the coming days, we hope to hear from Don Lemon and his representatives more about the grand jury transcripts. Okay, so that's all I'll say on that. I did want to mention just a little bit about the First Amendment because of this. The First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States not only protects the rights of journalists um, to report on the news events of the day, it also protects our free speech. It protects our right to assemble. There was a time when African Americans were not allowed to even assemble in public. They could actually be arrested for assembling, for getting together. And so the right to assemble um, had to be written down. We have so many freedoms right now that we take it for granted, that some of them were fought so hard to get. and that people died, so that we could have these rights. But the right to assemble um, is protected also by the First Amendment. And the right to practice your own religion is also protected in the First Amendment. So when the government moves to attack journalists, you see, it is not just an attack on one journalist, Don Lemon, or on Georgia Fort, or on the other journalists associated with this case. It is an attack on the First Amendment. So be concerned that this could, this, kind of whittling away at our rights. Um, be concerned because today it's the First Amendment, it's a journalist, but tomorrow it may be the right to assemble or the right to practice the religion of your choice. So we just pay attention to this regime, this presidential regime. We just pay attention to them because they are just up to so many different things on so many levels. Um, it seems that they are, bent on, determined to take away democratic rights and norms and to turn this into an authoritarian government. And Americans, we're so used to just going about our business, our own business in our own day, and we're used to things working out. And so, but this is such a concerted effort on the part of the Trump administration. Um, that it behooves all of us, to pay attention. I know that, as a former journalist, everybody is not as concerned as I am, but because other people from other professions have, other interests. But I've heard someone say that if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And what they mean by that is it's going to affect your life. And so just my thing is, I don't want people to be caught off guard. I don't want you to wake up one day and somebody is asking you to provide your papers, the proof that you are an American citizen. You know, when you're just used to your driver's license being the only ID that you need in the course of your day. So that's all I will say on the First Amendment. But feel free to do your own research and pay attention to what's going on with Don Lemon's case and also with Georgia Fort's case and the case of these other journalists. Okay, so now the next thing I wanted to talk about is democracy docket. That is I believe his name is Mark Elias, Elias. He is the founder of Democracy Docket. It is an online service. And he takes great pain to explain um, the attack on voting rights right now. And is just issuing like red flag warnings that this administration is planning some major um, assault on voting efforts in the midterms. Of course, the midterms come in November 2026, and almost everyone who is of any, is paying attention to the political arena right now, is predicting that the Democrats will certainly prevail in the House of Representatives and may even flip enough seats to be a majority in the Senate. In which case, and Donald Trump has said as much, um, that is one of his concerns that if the Democrats do take control of the Senate, um, and even he has some fear of even if they take control of the House, that he might be impeached. Um, and certainly many people on both the Democratic side and the Republican side, and many of independent people believe that certainly he will be called into Congress to account for some of the policies that he has undertaken. His assault on social programs, his assault on the education department, his assault on all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. They believe that he will be called to Congress to account for some of that because he's pretty much got off scot-free with doing whatever he has wanted to do, because the both houses of Congress are dominated by his party, the Republican Party. And the Supreme Court is dominated right now by his appointees, people who he has appointed. Although the history of the Supreme Court has been unbiased interpretations of the law, as opposed to loyalty to whichever president appoints you. Um, Certainly throughout the years of my life of paying attention to Supreme Court nominations, um, they were expected to um, interpret the law based on the Constitution, not based on allegiance to the party or the president that nominated them for the court. So, but this is a new day, as I feel like I'm saying a lot these days. But this is a new day, and the Trump administration, if nothing else, he demands, loyalty from his appointees, whether that's an appointee to his cabinet, or to the Supreme Court. And he expects them to sort of give a rubber stamp to whatever cases he brings before the court. He expects them to vote his way if he appointed them to the court. Okay, so Democracy Docket and with Mark Elias is just really paying attention to a lot of how the gerrymandering and redistricting maps, how that all is going to affect the upcoming elections. He believes that this government is going to try to there will be elections, he says. So they're not going to not have the midterms. But he believes that they're going to do everything they can to intimidate voters and to affect how the votes are counted. And again, voting rights is something that I've followed throughout the years. And so these tactics are not altogether new attempts at affecting the outcome of the vote. But this administration has threatened to put ICE agents around the voting polls, places where people actually go to vote. They are really pressing the voter ID piece. But more than that, they are threatening to have armed agents around the voting polls. And of course, if that's going to intimidate a lot of people just a lot of people will be intimidated by the presence of armed guards. And he knows that. And then there will be people who in the immigrant community who may believe that there's already some concerns about their status in the country, and so they will stay away and not vote. So Mark Elias believes that that is a major part of this assault on the voting rights of people and this attempt to affect the outcome of the elections. Also, the administration has moved very recently going into states to get the voting rolls, which Elias is pointing out that the voting rolls contain personal information about voters, where you live, how many, like maybe how many children you have, where you work, um, personal information that if somebody were determined to intimidate voters, they would certainly know um, a lot of your personal identification to target you if they so chose. And just like the assault, this case against Don Lemon, as he was just doing his job as a journalist, but now he has to face a legal fight against the United States government. Okay, the government has unlimited resources to pursue people, which is why our Constitution takes great pains to protect an individual from an assault by your government. Because there are very few of us who have unlimited resources to fight the government. Okay, you have to obtain an attorney. You have to retain the attorney. You have to pay someone, to represent you in all of these court filings because most of us don't understand the details of court of legalese and of all of the laws. So we would have to pay. So the consensus um in journalism and in all of the social attacks, like coming out of Minnesota, um, people are sort of agreeing that the idea of this administration is not always to get a conviction with people, but it's to force people to spend their money to go through these legal processes, to sort of bankrupt people by keeping them in court. Also to humiliate a person by dragging them through the courts. And then there's a whole psychological piece to wondering if you're going to be found guilty and perhaps jailed for your beliefs if this government is able to convict you of something, you know. So with voting, um voting is supposed to be our one, privilege of being an American that is for all of us. Okay, it's supposed to be that one protected right that we have. But the history of African Americans and voter intimidation is documented throughout. There used to be poll taxes. They would ask Black residents to recite, part of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They might ask them to say how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, asinine questions that really had no answer. But then if you couldn't answer it, you couldn't vote. You know, the road for African Americans to the voting booth and the right to vote was hard. It was a long road, and it is paved with our blood, sweat, and tears. And so we take that right seriously and we vote, as we did in the presidential election. 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris, 78, nearly 80% of Black men voted for Kamala Harris. So we showed out and we showed up for the vote. And as other people come, of course, we were brought here, not we didn't come as immigrants. We didn't climb over any fences. We didn't swim any, we didn't try, we were not willingly, we didn't come here. So, willingly. So we were brought here in chains and in the bottom of those ships that I was describing in the Middle Passage. Um, and so we have had to fight for all of the rights that we enjoy. And so when they come under attack, we understand that it's also an attack on our history, our progress, and our status as where we are right now. Um, but this right now, honestly, it's not a color thing. This is about the democracy itself, whether the United States of America will be a democracy with the rights and privileges of its people determining what the country will be, as opposed to a dictator, one person, one man, and his view, his worldview. Okay, so I just would invite you to if when you have time to pay attention to look up Mark Elias and the democracy docket. Um, he has laid out what he believes are like 7 points of attack that I'm sorry, 7 points of response that the states, each individual state can take to protect its voters and to protect the vote in the upcoming election, to protect it from some of these moves that they are making, such as having troops, having militias guard the polls. He has some ideas as what states can do to prevent that from happening. Um, you know, each state has its own legal apparatus. Each state has a court system. Each state has its own constitution. There are things that the courts, a state court can do. This is what Mark Elias is saying. A state court can do to protect its citizens' right to vote so that they don't feel intimidated by anything that the federal government does. And he named 7 things that they can do right away. And he urges states to go ahead and get started uh, doing those things. And I just urge you, if you are in any formal capacity in any state, if you're a city council person, if you're a county commissioner, if you're a state representative, that you visit Democracy Docket because he lays things out very clearly, these actions that you can take now, well ahead of the November elections, because that sounds so far away, November 2026. And while this administration has stepped back its confrontation with the people of Minnesota, many people wonder, okay, where are you sending those people next? Those ICE agents who pretty much were terrorizing Minnesota. All you have to do is go back and look at any of the images from those clashes. Um, some of those people have come before Congress to testify. Couple of women about how one woman had disability, a brain injury, was on her way. Miss Rahman was on her way to a doctor's appointment for her brain injury. And ICE had the street sort of in a blockade, and she didn't know it. She was heading to a doctor's appointment. And as they opened her car door, and were screaming at her to get out. She was yelling back to them, I have a disability. And part of her disability impedes her speech. She speaks kind of slow, and she has some physical problems because of this brain injury. But they dragged her out of her car. She said she saw the knife coming towards her. She thought they were going to use it on her, but they used it to cut her seatbelt off of her, to drag her out of the car. It's a powerful, sad testimony that she gives, but she gave it before um, it's a congressional hearing. But also, I watched an interview that she gave to one journalist about her very harrowing experience. As a result of that, uh, she has damage to her arms now, and she's not able, to raise her arms up as she was before. So, a woman who already had disabilities, is further harmed uh, by this brutal, um, confrontation with people. Um, Another young woman was shot several times, and Representative Garcia he presented the emails where the ICE agent had shared with his buddies that he shot the woman 5 times, but she had 7 bullet holes. He was boasting about that, and they presented those emails from him. And so we continue at Faith, Family, and Political Affairs to be in prayer for that entire situation, as I have been, since it erupted. Um, Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General for that state, was before Congress the other day, and just rudely treated, so terribly rude, by the representatives uh, from the Republican Party. Um, and so we keep Minnesota really highly lifted up in prayer. Okay, so remember Democracy Docket. As you are looking for um reliable sources to get your news information um and knowledge about what's going on around you. Um, because many of the voting challenges are happening in my home state of North Carolina, fierce attacks on voting rights. Um, ICE agents, fierce attacks on immigrants throughout the state of North Carolina, which is a highly agricultural state and relies on the agricultural work of many immigrants, but not just in agriculture, but in many parts, many areas of work relies on immigrant labor in North Carolina. And so the people in my home state are certainly paying attention to these developments. But other states, Atlanta, Georgia, um, this president just sent um, his investigators to Georgia to um, confiscate voting records, okay, the voting polls. What is he looking for? Why does he need the personal information of voters? For the 2020 election, this is what he's going back and revisiting. And Mark Elias is one who believes that even though he is going back to get the voting polls from several states for 2020 election, many people believe that it's all about the upcoming election. He's looking at names, identities of people that he can find a way to cut them off from voting. Um, he all of this is about affecting the outcome of the election. So be paying attention to that wherever you are. If you're a person who believes in voting, be paying attention to that and make sure that all of your voting credentials are up to par. That's something that I have to do because I've moved to a new state in the last couple of years. And so that's something that I have to do. You have to make sure that all of your stuff is up to date when you get ready to vote. You're voting. It's fairly easy process, but you want to make sure before November that everything is in order so that that's one right that you have as an American that you can take advantage of and you can affect the leadership of the country. Because if you agree with what's going on with this Trump regime, then you're good. You still want to exercise your right to vote. But if you're not pleased with what's going on, you definitely want to be ready in November because this is your one opportunity to say how you feel. A lot of people don't like to put themselves at risk, and it's smart. I'm telling you, it's many of us feel compelled to. It's part of our um calling, and then some of us, it's part of our profession, you know. But to feel that you are putting anything at risk in your life, um, to inform other people, um, you know, freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. Somebody pays so that you can be free, so that you can ride where you want to, sit where you want to on public transportation because African Americans used to have to sit in the back of the bus. Um, you know, some public facilities we couldn't even use like hotels, you know. We couldn't just go in on at a lunch counter and order whatever we wanted to eat. We had to fight for that. It feels so commonplace now that you wouldn't believe it that we had to actually fight to be able to walk into a restaurant and order food. Um, During Black History Month, you can learn a lot of this um, history because it's right there. A lot of people are reporting it. Many of the um, television outlets, many of the movie theaters, they focus on Black History Month movies, on TV shows, features, whatever. So this month in particular, the month of February, this information is very easy to find. If you want to, you don't have to be African American to want to be knowledgeable about the course of history, um, and how it has impacted people's lives. Um, for me, I just kind of feel that because of our history, we don't want to see other people have to fight these same fights. We don't want to see the mistreatment of immigrants because we've been mistreated in many of these ways, these confrontations with law enforcement and all of that. We've been down that road. Um, this effort to keep you from voting, all of that, and so we have a particular way that we feel. It's it's mostly it's mostly empathy, but it's deeper than that. It's like our people spill blood for this. Okay. So I won't go, too much on that. The last piece that I want to talk about is a very sad, I call it a very sad development. It is the Epstein survivors' plight. Okay. If you don't know anything about Epstein, let me just give you a little bit of background. Jeffrey Epstein was a business partner of our president and a friend for many, many decades. He was also a convicted pedophile who was serving time in prison for that crime when he allegedly committed suicide. His brother is among those who believes that it was not suicide. But his death occurred during the first Trump administration. The pedophile ring that Jeffrey Epstein led, according to news reports, was global. It was not just in the United States of America. It was global. And many of the young women who were girls at the time are still alive. They are survivors. They are waiting for their opportunity to talk with the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who was before the United States Congress earlier in the week. And the survivors were also in the same room where she was being questioned. And at least one of the representatives, I believe it was Representative Jayapal, I don't want to say what state she's from because I don't want to misstate it, but she asked the Attorney General if she would just acknowledge the survivors who stood behind her in the courtroom, in the interview room. The Attorney General never turned around to acknowledge the presence of those girls who are now women who survived sexual, psychological, and physical abuse from Epstein and his cohorts. There is no question now that what these girls have said happened. Okay, there's no question about it anymore because our government has videotapes, emails, all kinds of documentation of correspondences between Epstein. They have photographs of him with many movers and shakers around the world. But we have one president at a time. And so our president, they say, was mentioned thousands of times. I think they said 38,000 times or something in these Epstein files. We all have to say allegedly, because no one knows for sure except him what his involvement has been. Okay. But he ran as a presidential candidate. One of the promises he made to the people who voted for him, that he would release all information in the government's possession on the Epstein case. He vowed to them that he would release the Epstein files as as they've come to be known. He vowed to them that. And his administration, like they have with so much else, has done the complete opposite. I'm sorry, it's a little bit amusing because these people have risked life and limb to support this man. And the very thing, Marjorie Taylor Greene risked life and limb and reputation to support him. And this was one of her major um, issues. She was all about the release of the Epstein files. And she has come out in recent weeks to say it was all a big lie. Okay? She has come out to say that instead of releasing these files, this administration is working actively to cover up these files. This has not been a Democratic issue. This has not been a Democratic Party issue. This has been an issue of the far right, the MAGA people. Okay? This has been an issue pushed by Trump's own base, the people who support him vehemently. So, but the funny thing is, actually, it's not very funny, it's very sad. Once they determined that he was all over the files, then all of a sudden, they're not so eager to have the files released. It's very sad. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, would not even acknowledge the presence of those women in that interview room the other day. The representative asked her if she would apologize to them for the delay of justice on their behalf. Crickets. She had no response for that question. While she had a lot of response about questions that were not even asked of her. She was incredibly rude to the congressmen and the congresswomen who asked questions that she did not feel that she was obligated to answer. I think they forget sometimes that they work for the American people. They work for the American people. It used to be that the presidents would all of them would say, they would call themselves public servants. Public servants. This is the first administration that it's almost like they don't like the American people. Like they don't like for people to want to be free. They don't like for people who want to voice an opinion. Certainly that's different from their own. All of the ideals of this democracy, they seem to not like freedom of the press. You know, the importance of an informed people. Okay. And education has always been a foundation of our country. That's why there can be as many private schools as you want there to be, but this country will always support public education because we have, as a country, always believed that everyone should be educated. So, and have an opportunity to rise, to have their place, establish it in the American dream. Okay. So that's been a part of the ideals of this country, and they seem to not want that to be the case, particularly not for people of color, not for immigrants, for sure. And so I called that this last segment on the young women, the Epstein survivors. I call it the enemy of my enemy. I don't know if you've heard that term, But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I heard that somewhere before. I'm not sure where. Um, but the idea is that when we are faced or confronted by a common enemy, because these people will choose you to be their enemy, this regime. Okay. Uh, the names are countless. I talked about it in my last video. The names are countless in terms of Black women who they've just chosen to go after. 300,000 Black women have lost employment since this regime by the erasure of diversity and equity and inclusion programs, certainly, but also by slashing so many government jobs. And in addition to that, you can just name the Black women that he goes after on a repeated basis. Jasmine Crockett, Representative Crockett out of Texas, um, the attorney Fonnie Willis, out of Georgia, um, Letitia James in New Jersey, or no, she's in New York. Lisa Cook of the Federal Reserve. I mean, there's a whole list of Black women that they have targeted. This regime has just targeted. And again, these women, you don't know what resources they have to be fighting the government on a daily basis. When all they wanted to do was be public servants. Okay. Um, and so when I say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I believe that the young women, the survivors of the Epstein files, could be the one thing that may bring this presidency at least to a pause. Because these are young white girls. Okay. During Black History Month and during, the King holiday, people like to talk about being blind and a colorblind society, because Dr. King said he wanted his children to be judged by the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin. But we know that there are differences made. But the Epstein files are dominated by white people. And so this may be the one thing that, uh, with the race element removed, people can see the true nature of this man and of all the people who are protecting a child sex ring. Okay, so I think that right now the Black community has a lot in common with these women. We can learn a lot from their survival instinct. We can pay attention to what happens to them. Okay. And we can learn from um, their stories. They have insight into this president and to his friends that we would never have access to as a community. But they know things about him that we could learn from and we may be able to use down the line. Okay, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I'm going to end my Zoomcast with that. And I would say Happy Black History Month, but I think that this time around, this is a this in 2026, it is important that Black people stay informed. It is important that you protect yourself and the ones you love. And it is important that you stay informed. Um, I would say that about everybody, but the attack, one analyst, Charles Coleman, he said it's a psychological violence that is being inflicted upon Black people right now. And he was talking about the release of, by this administration, by this White House, of that video that depicted the Obamas as apes. If you don't know anything about that, you're living under a rock, and you're dangerously uninformed if you don't know about that video. But this president released the video, has not apologized for the video, has seen no problem with the video. But Charles Coleman called it psychological violence, particularly aimed at the African American population. And certainly to attack, the first African American president, first African American first lady in such a way suggests that you're trying to mess with our minds. Okay. You're not just being insulting, you're being disgustingly insulting and unnecessarily insulting. And to what end? Many people say that it's because we have not been out en masse demonstrating, as has been the history of our people in this country, when we felt that we needed rights, or that our rights were being trampled upon. We believe in nonviolent protests. Dr. King talked about nonviolent protests as a strategy. He didn't want us to be suicidal. In fact, he felt that to be armed was somewhat suicidal because the government has many more, ammunitions than we do. That's how Dr. King talked about it, in the past. So it did not make sense for us to go arm for arm, gun for gun against the government. But in 2026, that rings even more true, because this is a government that is violent even against white people. The 2 people killed in Minnesota were both white. So we don't kid ourselves about that. We know that we're under fierce attack. We know that the target is especially trained when we're in the crosshairs. We know all of that. So and this is a Black History Month to be serious about being informed, about building community. Make sure you know somebody near you. Make sure you're connected to your church, to your sorority, your fraternity, to your if you're other social programs, Eastern Stars, Masons. Make sure you're connected somehow. And as I always say, pray. Be sure to ask God, to intervene. And for us, call upon our ancestors. I believe they're already activated. I believe that's why there's so much confusion in the other camp right now. I do. I believe I believe our ancestors have been activated already, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to stay vigilant. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Black History Month. um, of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs, Break Every Chain. Um, Go back and look at the Zong Massacre video. You can find it on YouTube. Um, Go back and search out Mark Elias and Democracy Docket. You will be glad that you did. And if this is not your bailiwick, if this is not something that you enjoy, find someone in your circle who is interested in this kind of thing, and share Democracy Docket with them. Um, and also pay attention to what happens with the Epstein files, but more importantly, with the survivors of the Epstein um, tragedies. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs.